Hey guys, James from SIKKY Manufacturing. Today I'm going to show you a step-by-step install guide on how to install our E36 rack conversion on your BMW E30, including our steering shaft upgrade. Alright, first step of this rack conversion is got to get these wheels out of the way. Alright, now we got to get these outer tie rods unbolted from the knuckles. Alright, next step, we got to get these two bolts that hold the rack to the front subframe out, and then we can move on to the steering column. Alright, now we got to unbolt this steering column bolt from right here and the one down here on the rack. We already had disconnected the power steering lines. This rack swap can be done with the factory BMW engine in place. You might have to lower the subframe a little bit to get some extra clearance, but in this particular case we have the engine out just to make it easier to show you guys how to do this. But now we're ready to slide the rack forward. We've got the rack unbolted from the subframe, and the column is actually unbolted and free, so theoretically the rack should slide forward, the column should separate. And since the power steering lines are unhooked, everything should just come out of this in one swoop. Let's see if that works that way. And we're gonna need to massage it with a hammer, I think. All right, so you can see ours is being a little bit stubborn. So another trick you can do is the end of the steering joints. Since it's a pinch type fastener, you can take a chisel, put it in the crack, and hammer that in there. It'll actually separate the joint a little bit, make it easier for it to slide apart. Yahtzee! Alright, so you can see we got the factory E30 rack out, and here's the factory E30 steering column. Part of the reason it makes this steering column kind of crappy is this rag joint here. It's basically rubber with cloth in the middle, and believe it or not, this actually has a lot of flex in it. So if you're driving your car fast on the track, or cornering it hard, you're going to have kind of a wishy-washy feel in the steering wheel because of this. So one of the other benefits of our upgraded steering column is the fact that it replaces this rag joint with the precision CNC joints that are made out of chroma. There's no flex, so you get 100% of the feel up through the wheel. You can even feel running over a pebble at speed because of the stiffness and tightness of all the joints that come in our steering shaft. So from a driver perspective, it's an awesome upgrade. It really gets you connected with the road. So for this E36 rack upgrade for the E30, you don't have to buy a brand new one. In this case, we went with a brand new remanufactured version, but you can get a junkyard rack as long as it's in good shape, the seals aren't leaking, either way. But we went with a brand new one for this particular build. All right, so specifically for the LS swap, as you can see, the E30 lines come out of this side of the actual steering column, but the power steering lines come out of the front side on the E36, which is helpful for the swap, which is why it works better, and you can't really run an E30 with an LS swap. So another one of the benefits of upgrading to E36 is just more clearance for engine swaps. All right, so next step, we got the stock rack out, and we got this remanufactured, basically brand new E36 rack. So this rack comes with the E36 inner tie rods, which won't work, so you've got to run your E30 inner and outer tie rods to have the proper alignment and toe and all that. So you can reuse the old used stuff if you want. In our case, we're going to put brand new inner and outer tie rods on this rack, but we're not going to do that till it's in the car. And same goes for this particular one. We're not going to remove these till they're in the car. It's just easier to work on. Slide it up in here. The spacers that we provide in the kit actually go on the top side, so you're going to want to slide that up in here. Now I want to take the high-grade hardware provided in the kit and install it through the factory hole into the spacer through the rack, and then install your lock washer and nut. And we're going to leave that loose for the moment, and now we got to move on to installing the steering columns. We still need to be able to move this rack to provide the clearance to get the joint engaged. Next thing we want to do is clean these splines off here. It makes the install of the new steering joints much easier on the Sikky steering column upgrade. Since we're using a brand new steering rack, this side, on the rack side, doesn't need to be touched, but if you're using a junkyard rack, make sure you clean the splines so the joints slide on easily. So we're going to start off with taking one of the chromoly joints, and we're going to install that on the steering column side of the steering column. Obviously you want to use the splined end onto the spline, and then the D-shaped end goes down. So we're going to slide this up on and make sure your set screws turned out enough where it's not binding on the threads. And we can slide it up in here. If you have to hammer this on, do yourself a favor and stop and clean the threads until you can get it slide on by hand. Because if you ever have to take it back off, not only are you going to damage the joint by beating on it, but you're also going to give yourself a heck of a time when you have to take it apart later. All right, now we're going to take the other provided joint in the Sikky kit and install it on the lower side for the rack. All right, so now we got this bottom joint slid into position. We're ready to put the shaft in. Just one note, that the shaft on the steering column should be about flush with the inside of this joint right here. So from an install standpoint, you can slide this one on all up until you can see the tip of the steering column on this end, and same on this end. And then basically take your provided shaft in the Sikky kit, slide it into this, this joint first. And you can see it'll go all the way down and touch the actual joint, so we want to keep it right about flush with the end of the opening of this joint. Slide the rack forward a little bit. That's why we didn't put that bolt in. Align it with the upper one and push back together. Same thing, you want to slide the rack back into position and install your spacer, and then slide your bolt in. One thing to note that we didn't mention ahead of time is you want to center your steering wheel and center the rack so it's pretty close when it comes time to do the alignment before you connect these up. And then you're going to tighten down these set screws and tighten up the jam nuts, and you're good to go. So as you can see, compared to the big clunky floppy factory one, this low profile Sikky chromoly CNC version leaves a lot more room for activities. We're gonna move on to changing out these inner tie rods to the E30 ones. And like I said, you can use newer or used. Now install your new or used tie rods the same way you took this one off. Alright guys, that's a wrap on the install kit for the Sikky E36 steering rack conversion. Fairly easy job depending on what your skill set is, but you should be able to knock it out in a couple hours. Be sure to log on to Sikky.com or get in touch with one of our knowledgeable sales reps to get yours today.